And the flip side of that is so important because, like you said, temptation is happening inside of me. But when I speak it out, I bring it into the light. And it loses so much of its power over me just by that simple act.
Buongiorno. You're listening to Going, where God is at work. A podcast that sits at the intersection of missions theory and practice. We're walking on our call to ministry in faraway places, and happy to have you join us on the journey. I'm your host, Jesse Pauli, a missions leader serving in Rome, and I'm here with Alessandro Di Leonardo, a church planter in Cisterna di Latina, and Jen Williamson, a missiologist who lives and works in Lyon. Welcome back. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good. Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year.
Yeah. Talking offline about how we have all hit these cold spells in our respective areas. And then when you're recording a podcast, I don't know about you guys, but recording the podcast, I have like the heat off because it's a loud, like rumbling sound behind. So it's like during this time, my fingers are like freezing, but it's fun.
Suffering for Jesus.
You know, for all you listeners, we're suffering for you listeners that are sitting in your warm homes with your cup of coffee or whatever, listening to our voices. Oh man. Well, just a little reminder, we're in season 3. We're talking about all of the incredibly fun stuff. Now we're talking about the stuff that maybe doesn't get talked about very much. And this idea of discipleship dilemmas, kind of what are these taboo topics that have consequences internally and externally. And so today we're going to get into this idea of temptations and what happens with that. But before we get into those things, what are some creature comforts? What are some, I don't know, it could be a food, it could be a certain brand, but what's something that you find yourself kind of maybe irrationally tempted by, I guess you could say.
Or tempted to overindulge in, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or tempted to, yeah. I would say, okay, this might really blow up the internet here, but my husband is a mixologist. He likes to make cocktails. It's like science and cooking and art all together. It's very little about the alcohol. In fact, we make mocktails a lot as well. But we're aware of the potential of danger of that. And so we have we have to put sort of stop gaps in place or rhythms in place. Like right now we're doing a dry January, which doesn't actually feel hard for us, but it feels important for us because we recognize that that having alcohol in the house and the availability of making cocktails and the fun that we have just enjoying, usually we'll play a game on the couch and have a cocktail and an apero, some snacks, and right after work, a way of reconnecting. And we know that could go in a dangerous direction, that could lead us into unhealthy places. And so we put all sorts of limits around that. Because we recognize the temptation that it is.
That's a good one.
It's got to be chocolate for me. I don't even have to spend a lot, especially here in Italy. The chocolate is so good, so that's
true.
A temptation for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Food is definitely, especially like pastries, any kind of baked pastry type stuff. Living in Europe does not help with that. But maybe I would say technology. I find myself, it's interesting because it's often like trying to find if there's an answer to a solution to a problem with technology, and it's like kind of going and then wanting to buy different pieces of technology that might help solve a problem and things like that. And that's definitely a lot of what I find myself watching when I'm looking at YouTube videos and stuff. It's like, oh, what's the latest tech tech thing that you could buy, and marketing these days, they get your favorite YouTubers to talk about the item so that then you'll want to buy it because you think that someone reputable is telling you about it. But
Yeah. Another one for me would be Netflix too. Like, I mean, it's not because I want to buy things. I get like what you're saying. That's one as well. But just, it's easy to numb myself in the evening to just turn on TV and, and use that as a numbing factor.
yeah, they can become like slippery slopes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing with temptations. Not. I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but they're not necessarily sinful. The things that we are tempted by. It's just that if we overindulge, or it leads us to other things, or if we have a personal conviction that the Lord has clearly made it understood that for us that's a no-no zone. But we say,
Right.
there's nothing sinful about that. Yeah, but your conscience is telling you don't do that, which the word tells us, and then that's a sin.
Right.
Yeah, but in all of this, even you guys are talking in the first person plural, as if we missionaries have this problem. Like, well, this is other people, right? We don't have these.
I do.
My professor used to always say, when I was in seminary, would always say, like, no, not this class, this other professor's class. But it's funny because we rotate classes, and so that would be us as well.
Yeah, I think far too often there's this idea that the pastor, the missionary, the leader of anything really is somehow a superhuman and above any moral failures or any problems or any temptation. And what did they say? Like, you never want to meet your idols or whatever.
Never meet your heroes.
Your heroes, that's it. For that very reason, is you recognize that they're just ordinary people like you are. And so, I think that gets into a little bit of what we were on talk about today, because, I mean, some things that we've been seeing recently, and I was just telling the guys offline, it seems like it's coming a lot from the West, from the States in particular, but maybe that's just because there's more publicity or more...
I think so.
It's more visual, but more and more leaders, prominent leaders, are having... rather willingly or unwillingly, to getting out things that they've done that are overtly sinful, that they've had to confess, and so we're going to get into that, not into each of those stories per se, but into that idea of what do we do with it? What are the temptations that we face as ministry leaders, and especially from that idea of on the mission field, and then what do we do with that? How do we handle that? And I think one of the things that we could maybe even start off with, because I don't think I've heard of, pastors of large prominent churches get a lot of limelight because of the size of churches and mega churches and things like that, but missionaries often don't get that same attention. And so I think the question I'd pose is, like, why do we think missionaries might struggle to find, not why do we think missionaries struggle, but why do we think that there might be a difficulty for missionaries to have accountability, space for confession?
Well, I think structures, existing structures, let's say in the West, or all of us come from the U.S. So like where I was, there was existing structure, and so there was always someone who could kind of provide some sort of accountability, and even just say things where, okay, this is sort of modeling the idea of what accountability looks like, even if it's not taught. But when you come here, the people sending you, there's this sense of like, we don't really know how it works there. And so you're the expert, you should figure it out. At least there's a lot of that where we want to help, but we don't know how things operate there. And then there's the distance, right? Not the proximity, the distance. And so there's a lot of that. I think the distance and the fact that if you're in a place that there are no structures, then they're not able to build it for you, and they're kind of hoping that you do, but then that puts you in a place of temptation.
That's
Yeah,
good.
that's true.
Yeah. I wonder too if it's not, when you move over, first of all, there's a language barrier. Sometimes you don't have, just the literal access to human, deep conversation and trust takes time to build. Even if you're meeting with expats or whatever, like you're starting over. So we have that aspect. And then there's that added pressure to be producing, to be ministering, to be showing what you're doing. And there you have so much accountability for what type of ministry are you doing, how many people are you reaching, and then sort of a minimized sense of accountability for how are you caring for your own soul, and how are you monitoring your own spiritual health and well-being. And so there's sort of this assumption, if you're going to the mission field, that that's, already like settled. You have this level of spirituality and wholeness, as if that's a one static thing, and two, not a lifelong process. So I think we have to acknowledge that and then you get into this place where you're being challenged on all of these places, and you start to feel vulnerable or scared. And I mean, that just leads us to being dumb a lot of times. When we are vulnerable or scared, our decision making and our logic and our capacity even to choose the right things for ourselves is lower.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with VeggieTales, but the only episode I've seen is that one with, I can't even remember what vegetable it was, the one that just keeps getting bigger because they're lying. Every time they lie, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And so, I could see that, like, you're by yourself here. So even if you commit a small, if I could use that word, if you commit a small sin, but no one's there to check and to even give you, any issues about doing it, then you commit another small sin until it balloons up and then it blows up.
Yeah. And I think it might be important to note too that as married couples, we have at least some level of built-in intimacy that we need to lean into. If as a married person I'm ever thinking, oh, don't tell David what you're thinking, or David shouldn't know about that, then that should be a big red flag for me. I probably need to run and tell him immediately. Like, we have that built in. I think for single people, this can be even a bigger challenge. And I think we need to be aware and helpful and investing in our single brothers and sisters on the field to make sure that they're finding these spaces as well. And also, as a married person, I need accountability sources beyond my spouse. I'm not saying that that's it. I'm just saying when you first launch, if you are at least a married couple, you have a starting point for that, a grounding point for that.
Well, and as a couple, even if it's not the direct accountability, or you have someone else who's, also trying to live a godly way, and so that alone can help, spur you on a little bit. But yeah, I think you said something earlier, Jen, that I really think is a big piece of it is trust, because I know, like, when you're, like, the whole idea of being tempted by something is, it's all an internal battle. It's cerebral. It's in your, it's internally that you're trying to figure out what to do and how. And so whenever we let others in to our thoughts and to our the things that we're wrestling with in our mind, it requires so much trust, and whether you're new, sometimes you can be at a place for a long time and just be living in isolation because you just don't trust people. And I think, I was talking to another friend about this, and it's like, we were just kind of reminiscing in a sense about our friendship and how it developed. And it was like, well, you said that one thing that was a little bit, a tester of if you could trust me with something important to you. And then I held that, and then I shared with something with you, and so then that slowly started to build up our trust,
Yeah.
where we can go and talk to each other about things, and I think that's, I almost want to say, I think it's a skill set that needs to be developed, needs to be
Yeah.
trained and taught to people.
Yeah. It's
You know,
good.
kids do that. Kids learn when they're in the playground. Okay, you know, that person didn't treat me nice when I did that, so I don't want to do anything like that again around them or whatever. But sometimes as
Right.
adults, I feel like we don't test that again. We don't try again to.
Yeah. And the flip side of that is so important because, like you said, temptation is happening inside of me. But when I speak it out, I bring it into the light. And it loses so much of its power over me just by that simple act of making it external, of like confessing the temptation. I'm not saying temptation is a sin. Jesus was tempted. We can be tempted without sinning. But to acknowledge, I'm tempted by this. Just saying it, like, just diffuses so much of the struggle for me. I don't know about you, but I just, tell one or two people. For example, one of the things I decide is when David is traveling and I'm home alone, I don't drink alcohol home alone. I just don't. I've never had a problem with that. I just see the potential, and I think it's not good for me. And what Alessandro was saying, I'm convicted that that's just, even one glass of wine home alone, not good for me. So I've just spoken that out to a couple people. Now, they never ask me about it. They never say, hey, Jen, David's gone. Are you having, like, nobody's asked me. But by just knowing that I've said that out loud to a few people, it loses its power over me. And I have this sort of internal sense of accountability that holds me to that choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, the loneliness, the isolation is exactly where we have to be the most alert. I just think at my life, and the worst decisions I made were when I was isolated from any other input from any other person. And some of the strongest moments I've had facing temptation have been because I knew I was going to be in community, I was going to be around, other people, and so that helped me remain strong. So I think the concept of isolation. I mean, we see that even in how Jesus was tempted. He was tempted by taking him and isolating him from the rest and trying to tempt him. We know that there's this tie between sin and darkness, and yeah. So the dilemma is, and well, let's shift gears. So we looked internally. We'll get to like solutions or ways we can kind of combat these temptations and sins. But let's first, we looked internally. Let's go and look externally. What are the implications that different temptations have on our ministry and the people that, the others that are involved in our life as missionaries. In particular, let's start with like our churches, our denominations, our sending agencies, those that are, sending us out from wherever country that we're going from to wherever country we're going, and how they might, how they might handle a missionary or a leader being tempted and falling into sin, having some sort of a moral failure.
Yeah, I mean, those are three stages, right? Mm-hmm. Tempted, then fall into the sin, and then depending what kind of sin, right? Because we often, in our context, in the Christian context, moral sin, adultery, but in the world, that's perfectly acceptable. So there's also the legal battle, like, is this a sin that actually causes that I have to get the authority involved? But before going all the way there, let's start at the first thing, the temptation. I think you mentioned this, Jesse, this idea of building relationship with a brother, or if you're a sister with another sister, where you're being vulnerable with one another. I think that also applies with organizations, right? Like when you are actually opening up to them, then you are inviting them into the world that you are living in. So you have an opportunity to have somebody, your sending church, somebody specifically the pastor or somebody who's in charge of the missions, to be able to kind of be open about these things, as Jen said, to bring into light. But actually, I might be talking, Jesse, you're in my proximity. I might be talking to you, but you're not part of my network, sending church. So I should also report, at least to someone, to kind of say, to have that relationship, to invite them in as well, because how can they help you? You might help me, Jesse, but they want to help as well. So to invite them, and the ball is in my court, and so I should want to do that. And sometimes maybe we don't. And the reality is sometimes when we have meetings, right, when we do these check-ins, we rarely go to our problems of our personal temptation. It's usually, I got this church member, what do I do? How do I handle this situation? It's always others, right? It's never about, like, what do you... So I really appreciate my mentor who checks on me. He's always asking me about my marriage. Actually, our last conversation, he even mentioned about sexual temptations and asking, how's that with you? And do you have brothers that you can confide with? And he was even something that he made me reflect. He said that, accountabilities only work if you want them to work.
Exactly.
And he said, you should get accountability, but it will only work if you want it to work. So he said, get it, but at the same time, just know that it's not foolproof. And of course, hearing him say that made me think twice about, you kind of forget after you're in the field, you kind of get into the groove of things. And so having someone from the outside telling you in love, you're kind of you know what, I should look into that. So
I think we have to be careful too about temptation is common. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, no temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man. We will be tempted. And so the question is not, are you tempted? The question is, how are you dealing with the things that are tempting you these days? What sorts of temptations? And I think I can get on autopilot. I can just do my life and I'm not even realizing that I'm facing a temptation. If we're talking about something like watching Netflix in the evening and you just hit next episode, when I'm my brain isn't being renewed, my heart isn't being encouraged, my spirit isn't being, brought into the proximity of Christ or drawn to Jesus by what I'm watching. But it's just easy. And so if I can have someone who isn't going to just condemn the fact that I'm tempted, but help me identify what's happening there. And I think that's where you kind of have to get to the next level. And maybe we're going back to the internal side here, but we didn't talk about this. Why is that what's attracting me tonight, instead of picking up a good book or doing something creative or engaging in conversation with my husband, or what's happening in me when these temptations? Because if we're tempted, we're seeking to satisfy something in ourselves that God has provided a holy and healthy way for that thing to be satisfied. And I'm looking to another place to do it. So I think I also have mentors and a spiritual director. I have people that ask me those questions as well. But what they really help me identify is, Jen, what are you trying to satisfy with that thing? And how can you find that satisfaction in Christ?
Yeah, that kind of deep work of knowing what's going on inside that's causing that to trigger your attention and to want to draw you away is it's hard and it's not as common maybe.
But otherwise we're just treating the symptom.
Yeah.
right?
think also that's one of the things that missionaries, you know, we haven't, and this is, we're speaking in generalizations. Obviously, this isn't everybody, but we haven't had the space or been, some aren't even afforded the opportunity. You have to press on. You have to just keep going. You have to, you have to keep reporting back what you're doing. And, well, that was one of the things for my wife and I, that was part of our decision of our mission, is just because we saw that there was a lot of mental member care and counseling and things available. But I know other mission agencies, that's not a thing. Maybe they don't believe in that or whatever, but some of that internal work of, okay, what are traumas, what are repeated sins generationally throughout your family that
Right.
You should work on. I think if we want to kind of shift to thinking about others that we're ministering to, is when we're able to be honest and open about kind of what is tempting us, or maybe, I guess I'll pose this question to you guys and I have my thoughts and I'll share them, but there's a difference, we already said, between being tempted, sinning, and then living in sin, continuously, habitually repeating that same sin over and over again willingly.
Right.
Philip Yancey just came out and he said, for 8 years I willingly sin. Maybe the temptation part is not something that needs to be widely shared at every person, like that you have this certain temptation, but a close, trusted, group of friends or a couple friends or mentors or whatever, they should know about that. But then when we do sin, how do we go about leveraging that for our ministry, for discipling people and helping them see, so that we can create a cycle of helping others learn? What do you do? Because, for example, I don't think I've ever had a person close to me in leadership above me, a pastor or whatever, mentor, confess a sin, and kind of model what it looks like to walk through that. Now there was a situation, but it was more broad. It wasn't like a personal thing that he was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that would be interesting. Like, how can we use those situations? Because they're going to happen. We know they're going to happen, that we're going to sin. How can we leverage that?
I think it's critical. I think we do have to be careful. Again, I think the circle of confession shouldn't be any wider or any smaller than the circle of offense. So otherwise, you're just hanging out dirty laundry for everyone. And I think there's a point where it's helpful and there's a point where it can actually be permissive. I also think, and this is one thing, Jesse, you mentioned that you appreciated about Philip Yancey, and I agree with that he calls it sin. I think, excuse me, it's a slow fade. So no one wakes up and says, I'm going to commit this egregious sin today. We open the door slowly to one compromise after another, one small, even against our own conscience, like Alessandro pointed out. Maybe it's not a sin to watch Netflix, right? So at what point is my conscience being violated by the choices I'm making in watching Netflix? And one thing that I've experienced when I've gone sometimes to a small group to confess, like, hey, I'm struggling with this, is it gets blown off, like, oh, that's not a big deal, or that's not really a sin, or you can do that, rather than acknowledging and helping me to acknowledge that something in my conscience has been violated, or something that I feel like, it's not bringing me towards Christ. And maybe there's no 10 commandment that forbids it, but for my life, it's a choice that's not healthy or whole, therefore it's sin. And I think we have to... it's like this tension we have to hold. One, we have to create the space and the trust and, remembering that there is grace, there is forgiveness, and so that confession can happen and be useful and be restorative and life-giving. And we have to acknowledge the gravity of sin. So if someone comes to me and says, hey, I'm really struggling with eating too much chocolate, and I think, that's not really a sin. I mean, big deal. But for them, for Alessandro, he's like, you know what? I know I've crossed a line here, and what's okay for me or whatever. And I think we have to be able to recognize and honor where people's temptations, which might be different than ours, which we might be prone to belittle or dismiss, and honor that as if that's tempting you and that's, putting you at risk for opening the door to another, compromise after compromise. I'm with you in it. Let's confess it. Let's deal with it. Let's talk about, what's underneath that desire. What are you trying to satisfy by that?
Well, to also add to the question that you've asked, Jesse, I would say, obviously it's case by case, right? Every situation will have different nuances, and depending where you are, who the leaders are. But I think the common thread is that, Jesus made disciples so that they can disciple others. And so if you're in a situation where you have to handle someone's sin, someone who has confessed, and you're not quite sure what to do, invite others who do know what to do. I'm talking about maybe some leaders have a conversation with them, or ask a leader if they can connect you with someone else who might be able to help you because you've never dealt with it. And the reality is that others have dealt with it, because unfortunately people have committed sins and have come open to it, and so they had to deal with it and they had to learn. And so why try to reinvent the wheel when you have brothers and sisters that can help you, walk you through this? So don't do it alone, pretty much what I'm saying. This is a discipleship moment for you if you're the leader, or for your church. Your church might not know what to do, so invite others to help you know what to do. And like I said, it's case by case, so they might say, okay, this is how we handled here, but this is different, but at least let's work it out together, and you don't have to do it alone.
No, that's good. Well, I wanna shift us to some practical things, and I think as we were talking, I think we should do a part 2 to this. I'm already saying that while we're recording, but I think we need to do a part 2. So let's save for the part 2 things like when you commit offenses that draw you out of ministry, you need to step down, or kind of reconciliation, and those kind of things. And for the last remaining portion, can we think of some practical help that we can give the person listening to this? I'm thinking of, someone who's a new missionary to the field, and someone suggested our podcast, and they're battling internally by themselves. Is this something that is tempting me? Is it not? Like, what are some things that we can give them? Jen, you gave some great examples of, like, if you're tempted to, oh, I shouldn't share this with my husband. No, that's a pretty good sign that you probably need to share it. But what are some other ideas? What are some other things that we can give as some suggestions to kind of help people take that next step towards finding help and fighting the temptation and resisting the temptation? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jen started with 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation is uncommon to men, and so it's for everyone is tempted in some way or another. So find local people around you. If you're in the mission field, there are other missionaries. In my case, as a pastor, I would not find somebody accountable or to discuss with things from local the local members. I might with local leadership, the leadership in the church, but not like the members. So know also who you are sharing with. I would suggest local missionaries if you are around them. So build up that community to be able to discuss these things and be intentional. The reality is that most people don't do this. So you might have to be the one to kind of push forward and be the one to put first the foot down to slowly get others to join in. And from experience, I say this from experience, not many will bite, not many will join this circle, and you will be disappointed, but don't give up. Mm-hmm. I tried for many years, and I'm thankful that now I have found 3 local brothers to serve here in Italy that I can share, I think, almost anything. And so, but it took a long, long time and a lot of disappointments from others.
Yeah. Which is telling the resistance to this. because it isn't easy if we are being authentic, if we are being genuine, and that trust factor. And I don't know, you might get bitten. So I think we have to acknowledge that and be willing to risk that. It's vulnerable. I agree, Alessandro, persevere. That would be my encouragement as well, because again, isolation is so dangerous. It's so dangerous. And so being able to find that community and those people, it's just, nobody can do this alone. We're not meant to. So persevere to find the person or the people with whom you can be honest about your struggles. You will find so much freedom in that. I also want to say, while it can be hard to get there, it is so life-giving to be able to go into a space and say, look, this is what I did, or this is what I'm thinking about, and now that I say it out loud, I know it's a bad idea, but will you just pray with me that, the Lord would help me to resist or to stand firm, and to also dig deeper to figure out what's motivating that desire, what's behind that hunger or that thirst that he wants to satisfy in a different way. And I think, it's a process, but it's really important. And don't put it off. This isn't something that, once I've been on the field 3 years, or when this is urgent. This should be, I would almost say, job one. Job one when you move to the field is find a person or those people. And also, another thing that's interesting to me is those groups, they don't have to be your best buds. These don't have to be the people that you want to hang out with on the weekend, or, go hiking with, or whatever. These are people that share a love for Jesus and can enter into a community of grace with each other that you don't have to have a ton in common with. So it's don't expect that this person has to be your very best friend.
Yeah, one of the first things we did was we started praying for friends. When we got to the field, we just prayed for friendships. And it's taken a while, I would agree, like Alessandro said, for us it took a while, and we tried with different people. I think one of the things was throughout the whole conversation we had this morning is that sin thrives in secrecy. There's a reason why the Bible speaks over and over and over about bring things to light, about sinning in the darkness. It thrives in secrecy, and so the best thing we can do is, when there's something that we're wanting to keep secret, find a way to get it out and bring it into the light. And if that's not with a person that you know, or you don't have someone, find somewhere, right? Maybe it's calling back to your sending country. Maybe it's looking up some sort of counseling service or something, but find somewhere where you can find a person that you can get things out. Because when we keep it bundled inside, the secrets are what they torment you don't feel good, you're not doing good, and they ultimately are what continue to allow you to go down that slippery slope, one little vice after another, until you're justifying all kinds of random stuff. And I think that also is why many people that we see confessing and falling from ministry in high places, is because when you get to different heights of leadership, different heights of popularity, even more you think you have to keep those things secret, and that you can't tell others. You have no one else that you can talk to about it.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to add, from a spiritual, that's the community sense of things, but from, we often understand prayer, right? We have to pray, but I would add to prayer fasting. Fasting is a great way to break free from the stronghold of temptation, where that thing might not necessarily, it might always tempt you, but you just have a power over it, self-control. And so fasting helps. Then Jen, you mentioned about the dealing with the symptoms and not the roots. We should deal with the roots and not just the symptoms. So then that goes also, hey, if you feel like instead of waiting until it becomes a sin, if you're like, man, what is this thing just keeps drawing me, have a conversation with your pastor or a therapist, a counselor. We do these things called inner healing, where it's an opportunity to walk back in time to kind of see what strongholds the enemy has placed. And so just a whole process, especially if it has a stronghold on you, if it has the ability to really draw your attention. And that's why fastings are also good, because it kind of refocuses your mind and says, wow, why am I thinking about this so much? When it cancels out all the other noise, you're like, oh, I'm focusing on this too much. And then you have an opportunity then to bring it to the light, as we have already discussed. So the fasting and then getting some sort of counseling to go deeper. Don't wait until it becomes a sin.
Yeah, that's good. And there is the spiritual component as well, right? We do have an enemy that would like to destroy us. I love that Jesus taught us to pray, lead us not into temptation. Like there's a spiritual aspect that and I think we do engage that in fasting as well. Alessandro, I agree with you. And I really just appreciate what you said about bringing in people who can help you dig into, like, a lot of these temptations or these things that pull us away are rooted sometimes in childhood trauma, things that we needed to survive, coping mechanisms that we developed. Not to say that it's just because we're victims. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that when those things can come into the light, we also have so much more spiritual power and authority over them, because we can recognize them, because we can see them for what they are and not be tricked by them or just pulled into them because of long-running habits and learned responses.
No, that's great. I think we should do a part 2. We should tackle some of the other questions, as okay, when does it qualify for you stepping, or disqualify, I should say, you for ministry? When do you need to step down, and what does it look like to come back and be reconciled? But for today, thank you for listening. Thank you for taking time to tune into this episode. We really hope that you enjoyed the conversation, or at least that you found it insightful. Your ministry is really important to us, and we hope that you consider your time spent with us as investment in the work that you do. So don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, share this podcast with your friends or your church. And until next time, keep going wherever Jesus leads you.